My uncle left me something in his will. Not money, not property, just a name and a phone number, and a single line beneath them. Call this person. She has been waiting to hear from you. I didn't call for 3 weeks, because I knew it would change something I couldn't change back. My name is James Calloway. My uncle's name was Frank. My mother's younger brother, never married, no children, a man who had lived a quiet life in a small city 4 hours from where I grew up. We were close in the way of people who don't see each other often, but who understand each other clearly when they do. He was the kind of uncle who remembered what you had told him 6 months ago and asked about it specifically, who sent books he thought you'd like without explaining why, who said true things simply and without performance. He died in February. Pancreatic cancer, fast and merciless. 6 weeks from diagnosis to the end. I drove up for the last week, sat with him. He was lucid until near the end, and in those final days we talked more honestly than we ever had, about his life, about what he had loved, about what he wished he had done differently. He didn't mention the name. He didn't mention the phone number. That came from the lawyer, 3 weeks after the funeral, in an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a piece of paper with 2 things written in Frank's handwriting. A name, Margaret Osei, a phone number, and below them, call this person. She has been waiting to hear from you. I'm sorry I didn't arrange this sooner. Frank. I read it 4 times, put it in my kitchen drawer, closed the drawer. I told myself I was busy. I told myself I was still grieving and didn't have the bandwidth for a new mystery. Both things were true. Neither was the real reason. The real reason was waiting. She has been waiting. Not, she knew your uncle. Not, she has something to tell you. Waiting. The word implied duration. It implied something held in place for a long time, by nothing except Frank's decision about when to release it. He had waited until he was dying. That told me enough about the weight of it that I kept the drawer closed for 3 weeks. I called on a Sunday evening, told myself I would just check if the number was still active. She answered on the 2nd ring. Hello? Her voice was older, 60s, maybe early 70s. Warm, but careful. The careful of someone who had rehearsed this moment many times and was now living it. Is this Margaret Osei? I asked. A pause, brief but significant. Yes, she said. Is this James? I hadn't told her my name. How did you know? I asked. Because Frank told me you'd be the one to call, she said quietly. And because I've been hoping you would for a long time. We talked for 40 minutes that first night. Not about the thing, whatever the thing was. She said she wanted to tell me in person, that it wasn't a phone conversation. We met 2 weeks later, a cafe near her neighborhood. I chose her ground because it seemed right. She was smaller than her voice had suggested. 71, natural white hair, very straight posture, the kind of composure that comes from carrying something for a long time and learning to carry it well. We ordered tea, and then she folded her hands on the table and said, I should start at the beginning. The beginning was 1974. Margaret had grown up in the same city as my mother and Frank. Different neighborhood, different school, but the same streets and summers. She had met Frank when they were both 19. They had been, for 2 years, quietly in love. I hadn't known this. My mother had never mentioned it. Frank had never mentioned it.
It was a piece of his life I had simply not been given. The relationship ended when Margaret's family moved away, her father's work unavoidable. They lost touch. Both of them eventually built other lives. Margaret had a daughter named Claire, born in 1976. I sat very still. She had not known she was pregnant when her family moved, had found out afterward, already resettled in another city, had tried to reach Frank through letters she believed never arrived, had eventually married another man, a good man, she said, who knew the truth and chose to raise Claire as his own.
Frank had found out in 1987, 13 years after Claire was born. He had a daughter, and no one in our family knew she existed. He had been devastated, Margaret said, not by anger, by loss, by the 13 years he hadn't known. He had met Claire once, when she was 11, introduced as a family friend, had agreed with Margaret that disrupting her life and her relationship with the father who had raised her was not something he could justify. He had stayed in Margaret's life carefully for 30 years. Birthday cards Margaret kept but never showed Claire. A quiet contribution to Claire's education through what appeared to be a scholarship. Watching from a distance. He always said he would tell his family eventually, Margaret said. And then he was dying, and he finally understood that eventually had become almost never. I looked at the table for a while. Does Claire know? I asked. Not yet, Margaret said. Frank wanted you to know first. He thought it should come from family. I drove home that evening in silence. I had a cousin I had never met. A woman named Claire, 48 years old, who did not know the man whose scholarship had helped her was her biological father. My mother had a niece she didn't know existed, and I was the one Frank had chosen to carry this forward. I sat with that for 2 weeks, and then I almost didn't tell her. I want to be honest about this part because it matters. I picked up the phone to call my mother 4 times in those 2 weeks. 3 times, I put it down without dialing. I told myself I was protecting her, that she was 74, that she had just lost her brother, that adding this to the grief felt cruel. But that wasn't really it. What stopped me was something more uncomfortable. I was afraid of what it would do to her memory of Frank, the brother she had mourned, the man she thought she had known completely. I didn't want to be the one who made him smaller in her eyes. On the 4th day, I recognized what I was doing. I was doing exactly what Frank had done. Deciding that someone I loved couldn't handle the full picture. Choosing protection over truth. Waiting because waiting felt safer than the conversation. I called my mother that evening. She was quiet for a long time when I finished. Then she said, "He always carried things alone, even when he didn't have to." I said, "I know." She didn't fall apart. She sat with it the way she sits with hard things, steadily, taking time, asking careful questions. By the end of the call, she said she wanted to reach out to Margaret, to be part of whatever came next. We called Margaret together the following week. The 3 of us talked for 2 hours. We agreed that Claire deserved to know, that she was old enough to hold it, to decide for herself what to do with it. Margaret told her. Claire called me 6 weeks later. That conversation I will keep mostly private because it belongs to her. What I will tell you is that she was not angry. She was not shattered. She was something more complicated. A woman who said she had always felt, somewhere underneath things, like there was a piece of her story she didn't have access to. She said, "I think I always knew something was there. I just didn't know what it was." We've met twice since then, carefully, slowly. She reminds me of Frank in ways I am still cataloging. The directness, the interest in other people, the way she listens with her whole body. I think he would be glad. I think he would also wish he had done it 30 years sooner. Here's what I want to leave you with. He waited 30 years. I almost waited 3 weeks. That was enough to understand what waiting costs. It costs the people you love the chance to know the full truth of their own story. It costs you the relief of not carrying it alone. It costs everyone the years that pass while the thing sits in a drawer, or a letter that never gets sent, or a door you walk up to and then walk away from. Frank was afraid. For 30 years, he was afraid. And then he was dying, and he understood that the fear had not protected anyone. It had only delayed the truth until he couldn't be there to see it land. He left me a name and a number. He trusted me to make the call. I almost didn't. I'm glad I did.